Hello, friend. Tonight, we'll share a calm tale from the past told softly, like a bedtime history story, so your thoughts can unspool and the body can remember how to be at ease. In this episode, we drift back to the hush of the Cold War, to the thin line of the Korean demilitarized zone, and to the quiet footsteps of James Joseph Dresnok. This is not a lesson, not an argument, only a relaxing historical storytelling, shaped to soothe as the room grows dim and the night becomes kind. Where are you listening from tonight? A small town, a high window in the city, a quiet room with one soft lamp? Tell me in the comments if you like. And if these history sleep stories help you rest, you're welcome to subscribe and return whenever the evening feels heavy. Now, close your eyes. Let the breath slow. A door opens to another time, not brighter, only calmer. Together, we'll step through it, like candlelight crossing a quiet floor, and begin. After the armistice, the land between North and South Korea seemed almost peaceful. At night, the winds crossed the border softly, whispering through wire and grass. The soldiers stood in their towers, their rifles resting, eyes fixed on the line that divided sky from sky. It looked still, but it was a stillness held by breath, not by peace. The Korean peninsula was like a long exhale that had not yet finished. Villages rebuilt themselves brick by careful brick. Families counted names that would never return. Trains passed through stations with no destinations, their whistles echoing into mountains that remembered too much. To an outsider, it was a world trying to rest, yet unable to sleep. And somewhere, among those many quiet lives, another story was preparing to begin, not of generals or treaties, but of a single man. His name was James Joseph Dresnok, a young American soldier who did not yet know that his footsteps would one day lead across that tense horizon. At this moment, he was simply a man adrift, 20 years old, far from home, waiting for meaning to arrive. When you picture him, imagine not a uniform, but a face in the half-light, someone who wanted belonging, though he did not yet know what shape it would take. History will later write his name beside words like defector and traitor, but before all that, he was just another restless soul standing at the edge of duty and despair. The night hums around him, the hum of engines, insects, distant radio static. The stars hang low over the DMZ, reflecting faintly on the river that winds like a seam between two dreams. And as the world settles into its uneasy sleep, one young soldier stands at its threshold, listening, unsure whether to turn back or walk forward. That is where our story begins, in the hush between wars, under a sky that holds both silence and storm. Before James Dresnok ever saw a uniform or a border, he learned the quiet language of leaving. He was born in Richmond, Virginia, in 1941, a time when the world was already teaching children how to live with absence. His parents argued over debts and small disappointments. Words became weapons, plates broke, and silence filled the house heavier than smoke. One morning, his mother packed a few clothes into a paper bag and placed the boys James and his brother into the back seat of a car. They drove for hours through towns that blurred into one another, headlights stretching across endless roads. When the night came, they slept in the car, the seats cold and narrow. A borrowed blanket, the smell of gasoline, and the slow rhythm of passing trucks became the sound of their temporary home. There were no more schools to attend, no friends to wave goodbye to, only days measured by the hum of the engine and the soft murmur of a woman trying not to cry. She worked where she could, sometimes disappearing into bars while the children waited in the dark. The boy watched the stars through the windshield, counting them the way other children counted toys. Eventually, her family found them and brought the boys back, but the return was not rescue. Their father, now remarried, looked at them as burdens he didn't remember choosing. The new stepmother frowned at the extra mouth to feed. And when words ran out, their father took James for a drive, this time not to escape, but to abandon. He left the boy at a retirement home, saying he would be right back. James waited in the lobby, watching the clock move past patience into disbelief. When he finally understood, he didn't cry. He simply walked out the door and into a world already practiced at forgetting him. He was caught after stealing a bicycle and a crumpled $20 bill, small acts of hunger mistaken for defiance. Instead of prison, he was sent to the Overstreet Children's Home, run by a pastor the kids called Big Papa. There, for a brief season, James learned that kindness could exist without reason. Evenings at the home were simple: supper, chores, the sound of laughter in wooden halls. For the first time, he slept without fear of footsteps leaving. But trust, once broken, never stitches the same. He learned how to smile, how to nod, how to keep moving before anyone could walk away again. In the quiet of those years, he was not yet the soldier, not yet the defector, only a boy learning endurance before he ever learned hope. The world did not know what to do with boys like James. After his time at the children's home, the system decided he should live with relatives, an aunt who agreed more from duty than affection. Her house was clean, her tone sharp. Each meal felt measured, each kindness conditional. The boy tried to stay invisible, to fold himself small inside the walls. He would run away, sometimes for a night, sometimes for days. Not toward anything, just away. Away from the feeling of being tolerated. Away from the silence that told him he did not belong. He learned that the roads had their own kind of comfort. Steady, indifferent, free of judgment. The world beyond the door did not care who he was, and that, somehow, was gentler than rejection. When she had enough, his aunt returned him to his father. But that home, too, was only a shell. His father had remarried, and the new wife didn't want another reminder of a life that wasn't hers. James became the stranger in his own family, a presence that unbalanced the room. One morning, without warning, his father took him for another drive. The air was thick with unspoken words, the radio murmuring some slow country song. They arrived at a nursing home a few towns away. His father said he needed to visit someone, told James to wait in the lobby. The boy waited, and waited long after the car outside had gone. There is a kind of silence that teaches more than speech ever could. He learned it there, among white walls, and the faint smell of disinfectant. It is the silence of being left behind, the stillness that seeps into the bones and makes a child older than his years. When the police found him later, wandering hungry, they called him a delinquent. But he was only a boy who had nowhere left to knock. The Overstreet home took him in again. Wooden floors, warm soup, a pastor's voice that carried patience. The children there called him brother without needing to know his past. He slept better that time. The bed creaked softly when he turned. The air smelled of soap and supper. For a brief season, life became something close to gentle. He would remember it always, the place where kindness finally had a name. But every dawn brought the reminder that such peace was borrowed. Children grew up. Rules changed. The world expected them to move on. And so he did, carrying with him the strange memory of warmth that didn't last but still mattered. Some homes had walls, others only moments. For James, that would have to be enough. At 17, James Dresnok signed his name, where others had written theirs before, on a line that promised a future, or at least a direction. The US Army offered him something he had never truly known: structure, purpose, a bed that was his, and meals that arrived on time. For a boy raised on uncertainty, the predictability of discipline felt almost like comfort. He learned how to march, how to fold his uniform with clean edges, how to answer without hesitation. The shouting of drill sergeants was loud, but it was a kind of order, a language he could finally understand. In that noise, there was belonging, and belonging, even in uniform, was a kind of peace. At 18, during a short leave, he met a girl named Kathleen at church. She smiled softly, the way someone does when they still believe the world can be kind. They married quickly, as young people do, without savings, without plans, only the hope that love might be enough. He left soon after for West Germany, his heart folded into the letter she gave him before the ship sailed. Days in Germany blurred into one another. Drills, cold mornings, and long evenings spent in barracks filled with the smell of polish and fatigue. Letters crossed the ocean, slower than promises. Each word from home was a small spark against the grey routine of duty. He kept them folded inside his locker, rereading them when sleep refused to come. But time is a patient eraser. Distance turned affection into silence, silence into doubt. When her final letter came, it was short and precise, a farewell written without anger, just absence. She had found someone else, she wrote. She wanted to start again. He sat with that letter a long time before folding it back along the same creases, as if doing so could undo the meaning. The world around him continued, men laughing, boots scraping the floor, orders being called. He was still a soldier, but the promise of a different life had dimmed, like a porch light fading in the dusk. That night, he did not curse her name or tear the page. He simply stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the barracks, realizing how small his own life felt against the sound of so many others sleeping. For the first time, the army felt less like a home and more like a hallway with no door at the end. Yet he stayed, because moving forward was easier than turning back. And in that quiet endurance, a new kind of emptiness took root, one that would follow him far beyond the uniform. The letter arrived folded twice, the paper thin enough for light to pass through. It carried no scent, no warmth, only a few neat sentences that changed everything. Kathleen's words were polite. Final, she had met someone else. There was no anger, no apology, just the quiet closing of a door. In the barracks, James sat on his bunk, the letter resting on his knees. Outside, boots struck pavement, orders echoed, life went on. Inside, a stillness spread that had nothing to do with discipline. It was the kind of silence that comes when something breaks so gently, you almost don't hear it happen. He read the letter again and again, tracing the words as though repetition could alter meaning, but the page stayed the same, and so did the emptiness that followed. He thought of their short evenings together, the sound of her laughter, the promise that they would make it through, all of it now distant like a song remembered, but not quite recalled. When his service term ended, he returned to Virginia briefly, only to sign the divorce papers. The courthouse was small, air-heavy with paper and formality. The clerk didn't look up when he handed the pen back. Outside, the afternoon light fell across cracked pavement, and for a moment, he felt as if the ground itself had let go. Home was supposed to mean comfort, but nothing fit anymore. The streets of his childhood felt narrower, his own name emptier. The friends he once knew had moved on, some married, some vanished into work and routine. He realized he was already a stranger in the place that made him. So he re-enlisted, not from pride or duty, but from the quiet logic of a man with nowhere else to stand. The army, for all its noise, offered a steady kind of silence, one that didn't ask questions, one that didn't leave. And yet, beneath the surface of drills and orders, the weight of small losses gathered, unnoticed but constant like snow accumulating on a roof. Light at first, then heavier, until something deep inside began to bend beneath it. He didn't know it yet, but that slow weight would shape every decision to come. 1962. The war had ended, but its breath still lingered across the Korean peninsula. Between north and south stretched the demilitarized zone, 2.5 miles of uneasy quiet, where silence could be as dangerous as sound. By noon, the sun hung high and pale, baking the gravel paths, flashing off metal helmets and binoculars that never rested. From the southern watchtowers, soldiers scanned a horizon of grass and wire. In the distance, loudspeakers from the north's peace village played cheerful songs in careful rhythm, drifting across the still air. The music spoke of harvests and harmony, but its echo carried an edge sweetness sharpened by intent. Some soldiers said the sound made them homesick. Others said it made them angry. Dresnok mostly listened without reaction, cigarette in hand, smoke rising like thought made visible. Each day followed the same pattern: inspection at dawn, drills by morning, waiting by afternoon. In a place meant to divide, time itself felt divided, too measured in routines that gave structure to emptiness. At night, the men sought distraction in the small towns nearby. Cheap beer, loud laughter, faces that blurred into forgetfulness. Dresnok joined them sometimes, though even in the noise he seemed half absent, like someone already watching life from a distance. When the music stopped, the night grew heavier. Beyond the fences, lights from the northern side blinked faintly, like a second constellation in the wrong sky. The line between the two worlds was invisible, yet absolute, a single step that could unmake everything. Rumors moved through the camp as easily as wind. Talk of spies, deserters, forbidden crossings. Most dismissed them with tired smiles. But the thought stayed: what would it feel like to cross, to vanish into that other silence? No one said it aloud, but sometimes, standing on guard at dusk, you could feel that question hum in the air, like static between two radios. For Dresnok, the DMZ was both a post and a mirror. It reflected his own divided self. One side disciplined, uniformed, obedient. The other side restless, searching, waiting for a reason to disobey. In that bright, unforgiving noon, he could not know that the border he watched so carefully would soon become the line he chose to cross. The wind passed over the fence, carrying dust, fragments of song, and the faint smell of burning grass. To anyone watching, it was just another day at the edge of a war that refused to end. But to one tired soldier, it was the start of an idea that had no name, yet only a direction. It began with something small, just ink on paper, a forged signature, a brief escape to the nearby village, one night spent chasing distraction instead of sleep. But in the army, small things become large quickly. By morning, his captain already knew. A court-martial was set for 3 o'clock. Dresnok was ordered to report, to answer, to face the slow machinery of consequence. He ate lunch alone that day, the spoon clinking softly against the tin bowl. Around him, the others talked and laughed, unaware that one of them had already reached the end of his rope. The rice tasted of salt and nothingness. In that narrow, overheated room, he felt the air begin to thin, as if the world itself were quietly asking him to decide. There were no grand thoughts, no anger, no plan, only a deep exhaustion that stretched beneath his ribs, an ache older than the army. Somewhere far away, music from the north's loudspeakers drifted through the noon heat, melodies about brotherhood, harvest, home. The words meant nothing, but the sound found him anyway. He stood, left the bowl unfinished, and walked out. The sunlight hit him square in the face, blinding for a moment. He could hear the calls of birds, the hum of insects, the faint rhythm of boots behind him. Ahead lay the narrow road, the low fences, the long horizon where sky met soil. Each step felt strangely calm, as if he were walking not toward danger, but out of noise. He carried nothing, no weapon, no letter, no plan to return. The grass along the roadside brushed against his boots, hiding what lay beneath: wires, mines, the cold memory of war. But he kept walking. Behind him, someone shouted his name. He didn't turn. Perhaps he heard, perhaps he didn't. Perhaps he had simply decided that every door behind him had already closed. Later, men would call it defection, betrayal, madness. But in that moment, it was only motion, the simple act of a man stepping forward when standing still had become unbearable. The line in the earth was close now, thin and invisible, yet absolute. Above it, the wind trembled, carrying the last sound of summer cicadas. He took one more step, and the world changed. The 15th of August, 1962. Noonlight fell heavy on the earth, flattening every shadow. The air shimmered, and in that shimmer, one man walked alone. His boots struck the road in steady rhythm, one step, then another toward the invisible line that divided nations, faiths, and fates. Behind him, a command was shouted, then another. He did not stop. The shouts turned to warnings, the warnings to panic. Someone fired into the air, a sharp crack cutting through the silence. Birds scattered. Dust lifted from the road and drifted like smoke. Still, Dresnok did not turn. He walked faster now, each step erasing the last, as though distance itself could dissolve his name. The fence came closer. Beyond it, figures moved small at first, then sharp and definite. North Korean soldiers, rifles raised, eyes narrowed beneath their helmets. They shouted too, their words carried by wind and confusion. In that brief span between worlds, Dresnok belonged to neither side. Then came the moment of stillness, both sides holding breath, fingers near triggers. The world balanced on the weight of one man's decision. He lifted his hands slowly, open, unarmed. For a second, no one moved. When they reached him, the North Korean soldiers circled close. Boots thudded, metal glinted, voices barked in a language he didn't yet understand. A cloth came down over his eyes, darkness. Rough against skin, still hot from the Sunday, someone pushed him forward. He stumbled once, twice, then followed wherever they led. Inside a room that smelled of earth and smoke, they sat him on a wooden chair. Questions began, not shouted, just endless. Who was he? Why did he cross? Was he alone? He answered quietly, honestly, because there was nothing left to invent. The words came haltingly, and when they were done, silence settled again. That night, he lay on a cot with the blindfold gone but the darkness unchanged. Outside, a dog barked, and somewhere far off, a train passed. He was neither prisoner nor guest, not yet enemy, not yet safe, only a man suspended between two versions of his life. Sleep came and went in fragments. The air felt thick, the world unsteady, and when dawn arrived, pale and uncertain, James Dresnok opened his eyes into a country he had never imagined he would call home. The photograph, if there were one, would be washed in muted tones, dust, heat, and the faint outline of a man who had just stepped beyond the reach of his own past. In the grey light of that new day, another voice spoke English, a slow, careful sound, almost foreign in that place. Dresnok, it said, I'm Abshir. And just like that, the story of one man's crossing joined the quiet fraternity of others who had already done the same. Larry Allen Abshir had come before him, and after him would come Jerry Parrish, then Charles Jenkins. 4 men in total, each one carrying his own cracked reason. Fear, punishment, disillusion, love, confusion. None of them had planned to meet, yet the border had drawn them together, as if exile were its own country. North Korea did not quite know what to do with them. The officers questioned them, studied them, then settled on a decision. These men would be both symbols and secrets. They were given small rooms in guarded compounds, meals at exact hours, lessons in the language they would need to survive. Every day, someone asked them to repeat slogans, to smile for photographs, to look grateful. Outside their walls, loudspeakers carried messages toward the south, songs about peace, voices urging other soldiers to defect. Sometimes the men themselves were asked to speak, to record English statements, inviting their former comrades to come and live without fear. They read the scripts slowly, awkwardly, unsure which words they truly meant. At first, the four lived close, sharing rations, books, and the strange silence that comes from being too far from everything familiar. They talked about America, the taste of coffee, the smell of rain on hot pavement, the hum of cars at night. Their laughter sounded uneasy, as if it needed permission. In the streets, people stared, children whispered. To the locals, they were living proof that even the enemy could change sides. Yet inside, the men felt neither heroes nor villains. They were simply human, confused, lonely, and caught in a life that was no longer entirely their own. At night, they would sit together under a weak bulb, smoke curling toward the ceiling, words drifting between them like slow smoke. They were not comrades, not brothers, just men learning how to share a table in a place that called itself home but never quite felt like it. It was strange comfort, but comfort still. In a country of strict edges and unspoken fear, they built a small island of shared understanding, fragile but real. And in that small circle of exiles, each man found at least one thing he had not expected to find again: the sound of someone who understood his language. By 1966, the four men had been in North Korea long enough to know both its kindness and its cage. Life was orderly, predictable, carefully drawn within invisible lines. They were fed, housed, clothed, and watched. Gratitude and suspicion coexisted like twin shadows following the same body. One winter morning, they decided to try, not to escape in darkness, but to ask in daylight. Together, they walked to the Soviet embassy in Pyongyang, the only foreign ground they could imagine as safe. They spoke politely, asking for asylum, hoping the other side of communism might mean a door rather than another wall. The Russians listened, then refused. No anger, no threats, just a quiet dismissal, the kind that hurts more than shouting. Within hours, the Koreans were informed, and the men were taken back. They braced for punishment that never came. Instead of cells, came lessons. More language, more culture, more stories about the nation that had saved them from Western corruption. They were told that the embassy had misunderstood, that true loyalty needed only time to ripen. So the classes continued. Mornings of grammar and history, afternoons of patriotic films, evenings of reflection under portraits of the great leader. To Dresnok, the lack of punishment felt almost worse. Mercy that required gratitude was another kind of restraint. Freedom, he thought, wasn't always stolen by chains. It could also be replaced by comfort, by predictability, by a life so safe it stopped belonging to you. At night, he wrote nothing. He had no paper and no one to write to. The city outside slept under a heavy quiet, streetlights dimmed to gold dust. Somewhere beyond that calm, the rest of the world moved on, unknowing. Inside, the four men learned how to live within a frame, to smile at the right times, to speak with caution, to wait for their own thoughts to fade. They were no longer prisoners, not quite citizens. They were something in between, a living reminder that mercy, too, can hold its own kind of lock. By the 1,970 seconds, time had folded quietly around James Dresnok. He spoke Korean with confidence now, his accent softened by years of repetition. His uniform had changed from soldier to civilian, his role from outsider to something almost domestic. He had lived within the frame so long that it began to fit him. When citizenship was finally granted, it came not with ceremony, but with a small stamp on paper, an unspoken understanding. He belonged, or at least behaved as though he did. The streets of Pyongyang had grown familiar, the wide boulevards lined with red banners, children walking in groups to school, bicycles gliding through morning mist. Sometimes he caught his own reflection in shop windows and hardly recognized the foreigner looking back. Then came the films. Kim Jong-il, who loved cinema as others loved prayer, decided that stories could build nations. He created Unsung Heroes, a long patriotic series meant to tell the story of courage and betrayal. Dresnok was chosen to play the American villain Arthur. He learned his lines by rote, acting with solemn precision, unsure whether the camera captured truth or obedience. But the people loved Arthur. They watched him on screens across the country, hissing when he schemed, cheering when he fell. For them, he became the face of a defeated enemy, but also strangely familiar, the foreigner they could recognize. When Dresnok walked through the markets or sat in a tea house, people whispered, smiled, offered small gifts, fruit, cigarettes, folded notes of thanks. He accepted everything with quiet grace. Fame, in this place, was not noise but warmth, like a coat placed over the shoulders rather than a light in the eyes. It did not lift him above anyone, but rather folded him into the collective story. He was no longer a man to be questioned, only a symbol to be seen. In interviews years later, he said he had found peace. "They gave me a home," he murmured, "and I gave them loyalty." To some, that sounded like resignation. To others, relief. Perhaps both were true. Evenings in Pyongyang glowed softly then. The city's lights were dim but steady. From his apartment balcony, he could see the Taedong River moving through the dark, calm and obedient as the life he now lived. And in that quiet current, his own reflection floated, part stranger, part citizen, part actor, in a long story that the world outside had almost forgotten. Her name was Doina Bumbea, a painter from Romania, or perhaps a traveler, or perhaps something else entirely. The truth of her arrival in North Korea was a story with too many closed doors. Some said she was kidnapped from Europe, others believed she had chosen to stay. James Dresnok never spoke of the details. When asked, he simply said, "She was there, and we loved each other." They met, as stories sometimes begin, in a quiet restaurant. He noticed her dark hair, her careful stillness, the rare sound of someone speaking English with an accent not his own. To him, she was a window, a glimpse of a world beyond slogans and scripts. Within months, they were married. For a time, it seemed simple. A home, shared meals, 2 sons who would later carry his name and his mixed reflection. But nothing in Pyongyang was ever entirely simple. Rumors moved like smoke about where Doina came from, about whether she was allowed to leave, about whether love could ever be freely chosen in a country built on control. Her family in Romania waited for letters that never came. Her brother later searched the world for answers, finding only silence that sounded like permission and grief at once. When Doina became ill, doctors visited often but said little. Lung cancer, they whispered, though even that word felt foreign, almost forbidden. She died quietly, years before the world ever knew her story. Dresnok buried her memory carefully, never bitter, never angry, only subdued. In interviews, his voice softened when he spoke her name, as if touching something that could not be repaired. Their sons grew tall, fluent in 2 languages but citizens of one country. They became students of the Foreign Languages University, inheriting both his face and his fate. Years later, they too would appear on screen, new actors in the same old roles, playing the Americans their father once pretended to be. Then came the 1000, 990 seconds, and the famine the country called the arduous march. The sky itself seemed thinner then. Crops failed, fields emptied, and hunger moved quietly through the villages. Yet the privileged compounds where Dresnok and others like him lived remained supplied. Rice, sugar, meat, oil, enough to live, enough to know that others did not. He once said, "We never starved. I was lucky." But luck, in those years, was a word that carried guilt in its shadow. To survive comfortably while millions did not was its own quiet wound. So the family stayed indoors, lights dimmed, radio low, teaching the children to be grateful, to stay silent, to believe they were safe. Outside, footsteps grew fewer, markets smaller, laughter rarer. Inside, the Dresnok household lived as though time could be paused by obedience. History, though, does not pause. It only softens its edges over time. And so, amid loss and privilege, memory and forgetting, the life of James Dresnok continued neither hero nor monster, just a man carrying on through the dim corridors of survival. Two men, two versions of the same life. By the late 1990 seconds, only James Dresnok and Charles Jenkins remained of the four who had once crossed into the north. They lived within the same city, the same system, even the same air, but saw it through entirely different glass. Dresnok called it freedom. "I've got a roof, I've got food, I've got respect," he said once, smiling gently into a state camera. To him, North Korea had given structure where chaos once lived, purpose where abandonment had been. He believed loyalty was a kind of peace, earned not by choice, but by surrender. Jenkins called it prison. He lived next door to a Japanese woman named Hitomi Soga, one of several abducted years earlier from her homeland. She told him the truth the regime never spoke aloud, that she had been taken against her will, forced into a life written by others. In their shared solitude, something human formed a fragile love, born not of freedom but understanding. They married quietly, lived quietly, and raised two daughters in a walled city. Jenkins marked the days with small rituals, counting the hours, carving wooden toys, listening for foreign broadcasts that never came. He longed for Japan. She longed for light. In 2002, a rare opening came. The North allowed several abducted women to visit their families in Japan. Hitomi went and never returned. For years afterward, Jenkins lived in limbo, half grieving, half waiting for permission to follow. When he finally did 2 years later, the world he found outside felt almost unreal. Reporters, questions, noise. He was no longer invisible. His body still bore scars from his earlier life, the places where US Army tattoos had been cut away without anesthetic, replaced by pale, uneven skin. He said it was forced. Dresnok said they all volunteered. Two memories, both clear, both incompatible. When Jenkins published his autobiography, To Tell the Truth, he spoke of beatings, fear, and manipulation. Dresnok, interviewed in return, dismissed it all. He lied to sell his book, he said softly. "I was never mistreated. I live here free. 2 windows, same dusk, each revealing something different about the same fading light." Perhaps both men told the truth as they could bear it. Perhaps survival teaches each soul its own version of mercy. One man stayed and called it peace. The other left and called it deliverance. Between them stands a question that history never settles, whether freedom is something you find or something you decide to believe in. In the final years, time itself seemed to slow for them both. For James Dresnok, the rhythm of days had become steady, less performance, more habit. His sons, Theodore and James Jr., grew into men, their faces an echo of 2 worlds. They worked as actors too, often portraying the same roles their father once played, the foreign villains of patriotic films. In a way, the story continued, looping quietly through another generation. He appeared older in later interviews, voice calm but slower, his body heavier. Cigarettes, age, and years of comfort had softened him into stillness. Yet when he spoke, there was a gentleness that hadn't always been there. "I have no regrets," he said in his final film appearance. "This is my home." Meanwhile, Charles Jenkins was living far away, in Japan, reunited with Hitomi and their daughters. He worked at a small souvenir shop on Sado Island, greeting tourists with polite bows and a faint, weary smile. The world had turned his story into a curiosity, a relic of the Cold War now made harmless by time. When reporters asked about Dresnok, he would pause, eyes softening. "We were different," he said simply. In February 2016, news came quietly. James Dresnok had died in Pyongyang, age 74. His sons announced it in a brief video, saying their father had passed peacefully, loyal to his country. There was no grave that outsiders could visit, only a few lines in a newspaper that most of the world never saw. A year later, in 2017, Charles Jenkins followed him heart failure, 77 years old. The two men, who had once shared a fence line in the DMZ, then decades in opposite worlds, were gone within a year of each other. Their lives left opposite footprints in the same sand, one pressing deeper into the north, the other carried by wind toward the sea. Both, in the end, were shaped by the same longing, a need to belong somewhere, to quiet the noise inside their own hearts. History will keep arguing about them, who was right, who was deceived, who was broken. But the night does not argue. It folds their stories into silence, the way water smooths the edge of every stone. And so we breathe with them, softly. The tide moves, the stars turn. Two lives settle into stillness, the waves washing over the marks they left gently, without judgment, until all that remains is the sound of the sea. There are stories that do not end so much as quiet down. James Dresnok and Charles Jenkins, two men who once looked across the same border, then across years, each holding a different truth. Their choices will always divide opinion, but perhaps not the human longing beneath them. Both were searching, in their own way, for the same fragile thing, a place to rest, a name that did not vanish when spoken softly. Some say Dresnok was brainwashed, others that he was content. Some call Jenkins a victim, others a deserter. Yet when all the voices fade, what remains is not judgment, but the ache of being human, of wanting safety, even at the cost of freedom, or freedom even when it means never feeling safe again. History prefers clarity, but lives are made of shadow. In the dark, motives blur, guilt softens, and memory becomes both wound and comfort. The listener, too, may feel that quiet pull, the recognition that the past is not there to be fixed, but to be understood. We hold this story gently, because its edges cut easily. It reminds us that truth can be double-sided, that belonging can be both salvation and surrender, and that sometimes mercy is simply the act of not turning away. Now, the lights dim, the border, the noise, the uniforms all fade into distance. What remains is a man walking under a quiet sky, his breath visible in the cold, the world too wide and too silent for blame. And perhaps, in listening, we keep them both company, the ones who stayed and the ones who left, not to forgive, not to condemn, but to remember softly. So let the story settle now. Let the mind loosen its grip. History, like the tide, smooths everything in time. What we hold in the dark is not certainty, but care, and care, when held long enough, begins to sound a little like peace.